Then we charge $95 a month for membership with about 25 people. And we've been around for 3 years. We have 10 grand in the bank, and we're still doing well. We're about to buy a laser cutter. So I think that model is another possible one, but also that depends on a socioeconomic class that can support that. Another model is crowdfunding, like Kickstarter, Indiegogo, and so on and so on and so forth. So the crowdfunding model, I think, is also a compelling one, but it's challenging because I think Kickstarter is often used or more successful for products rather than like things in places that are started, from what I have heard in my experience. So there's just a few different models of funding, foundations and private companies. Foundations that, well, I can't really speak to all the foundations I think are open to this, because I'm not sure only of the one that is in Detroit, which is the Kresge Foundation. So they support the Mount Olive Makerspace. Foundations, government, which could be considered IMLS and MacArthur, which is a mix of government and foundation. And then crowdfunding, and then market-based things like selling products and services or memberships. So hopefully that's...
The sponsorship model is starting to work out pretty well for us, because you can sponsor a class or something much larger than that. It's just, it kind of all comes down to time, right? And doing all the outreach. So anytime, like we have a communications person that does all our outreach for us and, helps like say, hey, we have the sponsorships available. It's like figuring out your team to go ahead and, write the grants or talk to corporate sponsors or get your membership in line is really important because it's a lot of work.
And to also mention resource, and it would be great actually if we went around and talked about activities and resources you think are helpful for the Mount Olive Makerspace. Certainly Make Magazine, Instructables, DIY.org, Spark Fund, JAMCO, MPJA. A lot of these are different organizations that either supply parts or help with services. MakerEd.org, which is an organization that is with multiple funders trying to help build internships for makerspaces and help build this up as a resource. And I'm sure there's others. So
you've got Adafruit, right?
And Adafruit, which is another excellent website with a lot of kits and parts and projects.
Some success too. Some local stores like Active Surplus is a great store in Toronto that all have electronics and kits and parts and things.
You really need some Radio Shack.
Yeah, but they're small and they want new makers to be introduced to this stuff, so they give a discount to our members to save on parts for projects. So, are we talking about an interesting project?
Yeah.
Okay, great. Okay, so I think the core for us, there's really sort of 3 components to a good activity that we do in our space. The first thing is that we're not teaching skills. We're not there to impart specific skills to kids. We're really there to empower their own creativity. That's the first thing I'm trying to get across in almost every class that we do. So that way so my favorite ones are the ones that are most open-ended. So I'll tell you a bit about the inventions class that we do. It's an after-school class that runs for 10 weeks, 2 hours a week. And so for that first point, for empowering them, we do brainstorming first. So we just get them to just spew out any crazy idea that they want. And then we try and identify the parts of that idea that they're excited about. So sometimes they'll come up with stuff that's just really ridiculous. But like there was one example of a girl in the invention class that really wanted to, for some reason, she wanted to fire marshmallows so hard that they could pierce through wood. So okay, and they really do try and come up with the craziest things, testing us, like, do you really mean anything? Yes, we do. But then we try and identify the parts of it that are exciting to them, and then create something that's actually possible to accomplish with that. So for this particular project, were you going to talk about that project, Meryl?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. So do you want to tell people about that project? Yeah.
How?
Yeah. So how did do you remember how it came from? She wanted to fire marshmallows through a block of wood into what she finally ended up with.
She ended up with, she made a bow, which is actually stretchy, and then she just put marshmallows on the ends of sticks, and then they actually shoot.
Yeah, she actually shot those marshmallow balls. She fired at some cardboard. At least it appears to be cardboard.
It's a wood product.
Right. That's the point. It is wood. Yes. Because the exciting part to her was using her own power to fire something hard enough to pierce into something, and that it was food. And it was marshmallow. That was just part of what was cool to her. And so that's the second part. Is they learn by doing. We had to get some new materials. We need to make a laminated bow that can be stretchy. So we found a vacuum press from this company that makes them for skateboard presses that was pretty affordable. And she got into cutting the wood for her form and for making all these layers of laminated wood. And then hit her next roadblock, which was she's scared of pointy things. So she really didn't want to use a saw at first. And but she had to cut like a 2x12 into this form that was curved to press her bow against. And so how are you going to do that? And we wouldn't do it for her. It's like, if that's what you want to create, then you're going to have to use some tools. And so she finally started using the saw, the hand saw, wouldn't touch the power tools. And after sawing away for about an hour at that, not getting very far, then she finally said, okay, I'll try the jigsaw. And we showed her how to use that. And she was nervous, and we guided her through, made sure she was safe and using it properly, and eventually was comfortable using this motorized pointy thing, as she put it. And so learned a new skill and also a new ability to be able to overcome that fear. So that's really how we like the learning to progress, that they're just, we're teaching them the pieces that they might need to know in order to actualize their project. And then the third piece at the end is exhibition. I think that's a really important component to lots of this, is showing it off to other people, because that is a motivator. You got to get it done by the end of the 10 weeks. You better keep going. But it's also a moment of pride for them too, to be showing off how they did this. And we also have in a lot of classes, we started asking them again, like, if someone else was going to do that project, what advice would you give them? And we've had some really insightful things come up, like we had an alien Arduino class that just finished up last week, and we're asking them, and one little girl said, just right away, we asked her this, is I recommend that you get one thing in your robot done first. Get one thing working, and then at least if you don't have time for your 7 other ideas, at least you have something to show off. And that's exactly the problem that she had in the class, and she learned to overcome that, and she had a cool light sensing robot that would turn on lights at night, but not the other 7 things, but she had something. So that's my favorite activity. Any other activities you can think of in space you like?
I like when you do the toy.
Yeah. What would you like about that?
I like cutting it up and putting it together in
Yeah.
a different way.
Yeah, destruction is always fun. And that's the open-ended part too, the reconstructing them in a different way.
So, thanks, Andy. And so we'll start with Will. We actually only have about 8 minutes left, so if folks can be as brief as possible, and then we'll get to a little bit of Q&A. And also, all of us are going to be around, so if people have particular questions, I'm sure any one of us would be happy to answer particular questions and also take emails and that sort of thing. I can only speak for myself now, but I'm sure all of us probably. So, please, Will, take it away.
Again, much of what Andy said I could repeat, but I won't, about what we do. But one thing that you said was that you don't teach things that teach particular skills. That isn't your main focus,
Yeah.
and I understand that, but at the same time, I have found for us that a lot of times people will come into the space and they will see things around and they'll have some idea, but they won't know how to use the tool, or they won't know how to use the material. And so a lot of the work that we have done in designing projects is, what is a good project that will show you how to use a soldering iron, that anyone can be into doing. So like, some really basic projects, almost everyone who comes through our space makes a flashlight at some point. It teaches you how to use the LED, a switch, a soldering iron. Totally straightforward. You can do it in 2 minutes if you're me at this point, and you need an example before a workshop. But even if you haven't done anything before, you can get it done in a reasonable amount of time and have learned some things. We do still making, which is really fun, and it's also teaches you how to use the miter saw and the power screwdriver, the power drill to drill pilot holes and put in screws. Let's see, I had another good example, but it doesn't really. Oh, one really fun thing, we do a lot of take apart stuff. We take apart desk jet printers, which are super great because they have a stepper motor in them and a DC motor. And the DC motor is set up to a belt system so that when you move the thing back and forth, it spins the motor. You can put an LED on the DC motor, or two LEDs, in reverse polarity. So you move it back and forth and they flash in different directions. Then you pull the stepper motor out, which doesn't work in the same way as the DC motor. It takes a square wave. So when you spin it, instead of generating a DC current, you generate a square wave, you connect it to a speaker, you spin it around and it goes whoa, 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 and you describe how the motors work, what the difference between the stepper motor and the DC motor, and you've learned about gearing, and you have two ridiculous things with rubbish. With rubbish. Yeah. So that is one of my favorite things. We've also been in the vein of working with the people around you and making use of resources. We are incredibly lucky. There's an organization called the Public Lab. They do citizen science projects. Everyone should look at their website. It is publiclaboratory.org. They got their start doing kite aerial mapping of the Gulf Coast's oil spill and producing maps that totally contradicted the official corporate-produced maps and made a lot of really important environmental justice things happen in the course of this. They have chapters around the country. One of them happens to be in Somerville. And so we've done a lot of work with them making low-cost spectrometers and doing like little DIY spectrometry experiments, and also putting cameras on kites. Putting cameras on kites is really easy. You can make your own maps of your neighborhood. Making a map is one of the most empowering things you can do because the rest of the people who make maps don't care about you, but you do. And so you can have your own, and it can highlight the things that you like. There's a lot of things you can do with cameras and light filters, and you put them on top. And you can, for instance, take a photograph of how healthy the plants are by looking at looking at what comes off of plants that are photosynthesizing and what doesn't, and having filters on your cameras. So aerial photography is key.
So, like I said, we're at a school, and we, I think my favorite activity for this year, and I'm sure it's going to change next year, especially listening to all the ideas that are floating around, is global education. It's an international school, very important. So the third grade had to, as a unit on action. So what are they going to do to solve a global problem, a real world problem, and how are they going to solve it? So what are the questions, and what are the threats? So, like I said, we had a lot of boxes from our laptops we were giving out, and so I like mazes a lot. So we made a maze with an action unit in it. So basically, they had to design the maze, and we do everything based on the design process. So, what's the idea? What's the problem? Brainstorm ideas, design them, redesign them, build, test and evaluate, and then finally share. So everything we do is always based on design thinking. So they took a maze and they built it, they designed it, they used glue guns, they loved that, I was excited. They cut the wood, and then using the laptops they put in what their action was. So action and problem. My problem is the oceans are polluted. And then you have to go through the maze, answer different questions. Why is the ocean polluted? What can you do to stop it? Like what any resources that you can go to? What are the threats to the ocean? What happens? So then you go through the maze and you hit threats. You hit images that are relevant. And at the end of the maze, they come to the solution. So that's what I also like to do, though. So that's the final product. Is that also then we're going to take it to the next step is to really try and mix. I went to MIT this summer at a conference, and I got to meet this woman. I forgot her name, but she's the head of the High-Low Lab. Do you know Leah? Yes. She was awesome, and so to really try and combine and mix as much high technology and low technology as possible. So what we're going to do at the end is put in circuitry in the back, so when they reach the marble, maybe I'll get some kind of electronic marble or something, I'm sure that exists, or maybe I'll just cover it with aluminum foil. And so when it gets to the end of the maze, a light pops up, and there's going to be a light that occurs. I'm like, oh, you got the right answer. Like, I don't remember if you remember those old games in the olden days where you had like these things and you put like, start here, this is right, and you put here, and it was wrong. Do you remember that? Something like that, so that we're mixing in together some kind of like, you start here, you click on this action, oh, you shouldn't have done that, now the ocean's gonna be polluted, or, you click on that, oh yay, and you just saved 1 million fish. So, something like that was a successful project.
By the way, that also brings up 2 other very awesome resources, which out of the MIT Media Lab is the High-Low Tech Group and the Lifelong Kindergarten Group.
Yeah.
And Scratch came out of the Lifelong Kindergarten Group, as did Lego Mindstorms. And the High-Low Tech Group does a lot of work with wearable electronics and many other things. So they have some really awesome project examples for various easy-to-do kid stuff.
Yeah, pop-up,
And adult stuff.
Yeah.
Maybe.
And making yes.
Yeah.
Okay. All of Dave's right.
We have boys who knit, and they asked for manly yarn. So we went online and we found knittable Kevlar yarn, which is used in bulletproof jackets.
Nice.
And we are now working on bulletproof scarves with Valerie, our craft instructor, is here with us. So the teens letting us know what they wanted and us providing it.
There's steel yarn.
There is still yarn. I've heard about that.
It's very expensive.
Yeah, we haven't gotten
It's
that.
very soft.
So hard to choose. Well, I'm going to be really LA, and I'm going to give you a film example. So we had a couple of makeup effects classes, and we had one of the makeup effects artists from The Walking Dead come in and turn us all into zombies.
Nice.
Well, he had an example person that went up there, and he turned that person into this amazing zombie. The rest of us, pretty good. We got, bites on our necks and our arms and lots of blood everywhere. That was a pretty exciting class. As a fan of The Walking Dead, I was a total fangirl at the same time, so it was awesome. And then related film one, there's this really great kit called it's the Tabletop Film Studio. It was also a Kickstarter. And literally it's this studio made out of cardboard that fits, it's like this big, so it fits on, small tables. And you just use your, for filming, you just use an iPhone or an iPad or some other, smartphone with a camera. And you make all your characters and your scenes, or you just use the ones that come with the kit. And so the class was, we had these amazing instructors that came in, some from USC, some from a couple of our other universities, and so they were actual instructors. And all the kids got into different groups. They came up with their stories and had a storyboard, and then they filmed and directed, and then they learned how to use iMovie, right, so they could edit right on their phone. So it was really simple. We didn't need a lot of stuff to do it, and they all felt pretty excited about being filmmakers back there. So I really liked that one a lot. And it's something that we can continue to do. Like anybody can come in and set up one of those tabletop film studios and just play around with it. So it was cool.
So I'd like to thank all the panelists, but also, question?
It's just a quick one. Do your spaces, you talked a lot about workshop programs, et cetera. Do your spaces have open hangout, drop-in opportunities? Does everybody, somebody, let's talk about that hangout place.
Yeah, we have an open shop every Friday where we do it by take what you can, just to make it accessible for community, also let people come in and work on whatever they want, and that's actually one of the most popular nights now. And we're going to open the second one with kids coming with ideas and without. So we try to have an activity that they can jump into if they don't have an idea, and we help them try and figure out how to do their idea if they do have one.
And it could be a no fast, just nodding if you do. And if you do, can you hang out without me?
Yeah, we have a big spaceship to hang out in. We actually have a lounge area, so you can come in and literally hang out and read a book or just,
If we don't have anything else going on, any team can come in and ask to work on a project. They've already started in a workshop, and we get them set up and working.
And no, you have to be part of our school.
Well,
Sorry.
I'd like to thank all the panelists, but I'd also like to mention one of the underlying themes I heard a lot of is a lot of crossover of traditional gender-based activities, or what is normally it's like men knitting, which is something that I think is really cool.
But manly yarn.
But also, and also the breadth of disciplines that are offered. I mean, I think for young people particularly, it's important to introduce them to a lot of different things so they have an opportunity to explore a passion that they may not otherwise get a chance to explore. And then partnering with other organizations, companies, or whatever to get them more depth when that period comes, I think is particularly valuable. So, just reinforcing that. I hope that was helpful. Thank you, everybody, for joining us, and feel free to talk to us afterwards.